On a quiet night, a massive tower appeared in the darkness, accompanied by a faint, mysterious sound echoing through the air. There was a restrained person, suffering and gasping in pain, as another voice threatened him not to lose consciousness now. The man let out a loud scream of agony when he was injected with a powerful stimulant. Someone was observing the experiment, commenting that the stimulant had lasted for 461 seconds this time, and that it had taken longer than before. The restrained individual was considered an exceptional talent for experiments, from the observer's point of view. The mages discussed the results among themselves and decided to try a new stimulant to enhance this person's abilities, as he had managed to suppress the response of the mana circuit in his body after the second injection. A man who appeared to be of great importance entered the magic tower, known as the strongest tower in the empire. Meanwhile, the restrained young man began to feel as though he were dying slowly, blood flowing from his body. He bitterly questioned in his mind the reason that had brought him to such a miserable state. He kept wondering why he ended up like this despite his talent and intelligence. At that moment, a small insect appeared crawling on the wall. Suddenly, the young man was injected with power again, causing him immense suffering. He pleaded desperately for them to stop the pain, but they ignored his cries. The tower's master mage was annoyed by his screaming and ordered to be notified once the experiment was over, before leaving the place. The young man continued to wonder in despair why he was dying in the very place he had once dreamed of being in. He felt heartbroken as he looked around at the magic surrounding him in the tower he had once dreamed of. He was subjected to violence and beatings by someone who insulted and mocked him harshly. This person mocked the restrained Verdun, calling him talentless, and claiming he had no magic at all, despite the intelligence everyone praised him for. He sarcastically told him that his life and knowledge were being drained in a secret laboratory. He kept provoking Verdun, demanding he speak with the same arrogance he once had. The small insect continued observing the painful scene as the mage continued mocking Verdun, saying he couldn't even faint because of his current condition. The mage noticed that young Verdun was not listening or focusing on him at all. He became extremely annoyed by Verdun's distraction and angrily asked where he was looking. He suddenly discovered that the experimental insects had escaped and spread throughout the place. The mage became furious with his assistants, scolding them harshly for their failure, and crushed the ant under his foot. One of the mages mocked Verdun, describing him as nothing more than a useful insect because he had no magical reaction and couldn't even use any magic to break his restraints. Another replied that, thanks to him, they had been able to conduct an S-class experiment and extract its elements. Verdun asked once more in sorrow, "Why is this happening?" as they mocked his friend Rauflin. The cruel mockery continued as they expressed pity toward Rauflin for being friends with such a person. The insect was seen lying on the ground, dying, as Verdun asked again why this was happening to him. He smiled bitterly and painfully as he realized something in that harsh moment. Verdun began to speak in a low, angry voice, while the mage mocked him, asking what he was muttering about. Verdun suddenly exploded, shouting at them furiously, demanding that they be silent. He realized deep down that everything happening to him was because of his own weakness. He began to recall how his suffering started 15 years ago, when he was raised in an orphanage because he had no parents, and eventually ended up at the magic tower as an ordinary worker. He explained that no matter how much effort he put in, he couldn't become a mage due to his limited growth. That was a sentence passed on him when he was 7 years old, after he underwent the mage assessment test and was deemed talentless, a devastating blow for someone whose only goal was to become a mage. Despite everything, he never gave up on his dream and secretly worked in the tower, trying to learn from spellbooks. In the tower's library, he read extensively and learned, confident in his intelligence despite his weak magic. Years passed, and he was eventually recognized as a genius and finally earned the position of a researcher in the tower. Everyone praised his intelligence in amazement, and he himself discovered the truth of his intellectual superiority. He felt joy when the researcher Lockhart praised him after Verdun first presented his research to him. Verdun assured Lockhart that he hadn't shown the research to anyone else. The young man felt happy because Lockhart acknowledged his abilities, and he hoped to become an official researcher. He was shocked when he realized that Lockhart had stolen his research and claimed it as his own. Verdun tried desperately to convince the tower's head that the stolen research was his. He explained how his research had disappeared the day before submission and how Lockhart had claimed it. The tower head expressed his surprise, asking if Verdun was truly the one behind the theory of multidimensional communication. The young man begged the tower master to let him explain everything from the beginning. The tower head was surprised that such talent existed among the regular researchers. Verdun later regretted going to the tower head that day, especially when the tower master, in a frightening tone, told him to come to his lab in 2 days, when the moon would be obscured. Verdun wondered if he could have lived a normal life had he escaped the tower back then, for that was when his difficult life began, a worker by day and an experimental subject by night. He was forced to create a magic circle and test his own theory, risking his life in the process. Even when he tried to reveal the truth, he was threatened that the tower would kill the people he cared about. It was then that Verdun hopelessly realized everything was over. He lay in a dark cell, wondering what his next step would be. And then his mind began to replay memories as he heard voices calling to him from afar. A memory from the past appeared. He was running joyfully with his friend Roflin. He wondered in confusion whether these memories were truly fragments of his childhood returning to him now. Verdun recalled memories from the past, when he and his friend Roflin had promised each other to become great mages together. Verdun had warmly agreed to that promise, as they sealed it with their pinky fingers. He thought with regret that if his potential for growth had been just a little better, things might have turned out differently. Verdun smiled in his memories, wondering if he could have changed anything had the circumstances been different. But his smile quickly faded as he returned to reality, quietly admitting to himself that everything was over now. He confirmed within himself, with a sense of despair, that it truly was over. In his dark cell, the disturbing sound echoed once again around Verdun. That same sound he always heard during the experiments made him feel as though he no longer had the strength to resist. Then he heard a strange voice telling him that things were not over yet, despite his desire to die. Verdun realized the voice was right. Things were not over yet. A dark entity appeared to him, telling him that he had to survive for the sake of vengeance and survival. The entity asked him to endure the pain, no matter how intense it was. It promised him that he would be reborn, possessing power that would ensure he was never humiliated again. The dark voice told him he would surpass his current limits. Verdun regained his resolve and decided not to give in. He looked up at the glowing moon and repeated to himself that it wasn't over yet. He was determined to complete the plan he had spent 7 years preparing for revenge. Only one final problem remained that he had to solve. Verdun realized that intelligence alone wasn't enough to face overwhelming power. And so, he decided to challenge his fate and rebuild his theory to reconstruct his body anew. He named it the Sky Challenging Theory and officially declared its beginning. He staked everything on it, affirming that by tomorrow he would surpass his limits. He was determined to break through his limits completely, no matter the outcome. He decided to accept death if that was the price of completing his theory and reconstructing his body. He realized that all that was left now was to prove the success of his theory through practice. He decided to use an ancient artifact that would allow him to use magic just once, even if it meant his body would shatter during the experiment. He was resolute in reclaiming his freedom, no matter the cost. On the evening of the next day, the long night passed, and the day to execute his plan finally began. The cell door opened with a humiliating voice ordering him to clean the alchemy lab. Verdun appeared standing before another mage, who mocked him and told him not to slack off, especially with the festival approaching. He shouted in his face angrily, demanding an answer. Verdun replied calmly and in a low voice, then silently walked away. He went alone to clean the lab. Verdun turned in surprise when he heard a voice asking if he was cleaning alone. Roflin suddenly appeared in front of him, smiling. Verdun asked her why she came, and she replied that she came to say goodbye before her departure. Verdun remembered that Roflin was going to study in the magical city of Verenti, a privilege granted only to exceptional talents. He calmly congratulated her and wished her luck, though she seemed hesitant. Roflin extended her hand and told him that her offer still stood. He could come with her to Verenti. She tried to convince him that the new place would open greater opportunities for him, but he remained silent and hesitant. Roflin felt embarrassed and tense, trying to justify her request by saying she just wanted someone to talk to. But Verdun gently apologized and told her he would stay where he was. Roflin looked sad and disappointed by his decision. Before she left, she told him she would send him letters. Verdun felt sorrow as he watched her leave, thinking to himself that she had no idea what he was going through. He thought bitterly that she knew nothing of the suffering he endured. Despite all that, he felt relieved that she wouldn't get involved in his plan. He was at least grateful for that. The magical festival began in the tower, during which the high-ranking mages left, and only the lower-ranking ones remained. Verdun moved quietly through the tower, taking advantage of everyone being distracted by the festival. He knocked on the treasure room door, identifying himself. The guard asked why he had come so late, and Verdun told him the tower master had ordered him to clean the treasure storage. The guard scolded him for being late and not getting prior permission. He allowed him in but sternly warned him not to cause any trouble. Verdun entered the room quietly. He placed his hand on a magical artifact to activate it. Verdun confirmed to himself that he had successfully activated the sound-blocking device. He began executing his plan in complete secrecy. He walked steadily toward his goal. Powerful magic appeared before him as he prepared for the critical phase of his plan. Verdun began his plan by focusing on the magical artifact known as the Second Circle, a special staff that allows a mage to cast 3 spells at once and temporarily activates the wielder's latent talents. Its cost was extremely high. Verdun realized that executing his plan required obtaining this staff, and to do so, he had to disable the protective magic circle guarding it. That protective circle was of the 7th level, designed by the Tower Master himself, which made things even more complicated. Verdun remembered he had spent the past 7 years studying how to destroy that very magic circle the Tower Master was so proud of. With all his strength and determination, he successfully destroyed the magic circle himself. Meanwhile, some of the mages in charge of guarding the tower's power source were lamenting their bad luck for having to work while others enjoyed the festival. One of them was complaining that if the selection were based on skill, he would have been chosen instead of being stuck there. Suddenly Verdun entered, and they immediately ordered him to bring them more drinks. The mages chatted among themselves about how hard it was to get the position of Tower Master and mocked the whole system. One joked that if the other ever became Tower Master, he would serve him drinks for free. The other took it seriously and promised he would remind him of that promise when he did become the Tower Master. Suddenly, the Second Circle staff appeared in Verdun's hand before them, shocking them greatly, and he slashed one of their throats. The other mage asked in utter disbelief what Verdun was doing. Verdun advanced toward him with intense determination, holding the staff, which terrified and confused the mage. The mage screamed in shock, asking if Verdun had gone mad, but Verdun admitted these reactions were expected. The mage lashed out angrily, accusing Verdun of being just a weakling daring to attack a real mage. He cast a powerful 3rd-level spell at Verdun called Tidal Wave, challenging him to survive it. Despite the power of the spell, Verdun remained calm, repeating to himself, a 3rd-level spell. Verdun responded swiftly with a counterspell called Earth Spear, effortlessly breaking the mage's attack. The mage was left in shock and disbelief, never expecting Verdun to actually use magic. He fell to the ground, screaming in intense pain. The injured mage asked in astonishment how Verdun, who had always been ranked as a level 1, could use such powerful magic. Verdun replied sarcastically, surprised by his shock, as if someone like him could never use magic. Then, with a chilling calmness, Verdun added that this is what happens when people are underestimated too much, referring to both the mage and the entire tower. After that, Verdun stepped forward to see the tower's magical power source up close for the first time. He stopped before the power source, which appeared as a massive magical heart connected to a powerful and complex magic circle. Verdun stood before the magical power source, ready to execute the plan he had spent 7 full years preparing. He told himself that if he failed to use this energy, he had no idea what would happen to him. Mysterious glowing magical circles appeared on his back, preparing to unleash the spell that defied the laws of the sky. Verdun decided that if he didn't try now, he would never know the outcome of his efforts. He drove the magical staff into the ground, unleashing immense power. A giant magical circle glowing with energy surrounded him, while he stood firmly in its center. He cast his spell, Body Reconstruction, with tremendous force. Verdun shouted at the top of his lungs, "Sky Challenge!" as energy surged violently around him. The energy explosion caused a bright, intense light to appear, clearly visible from the top of the magic tower. The explosion's force reached toward the sky, sending a massive beam of light visible from afar. Some travelers in a nearby carriage noticed the huge explosion that lit up the sky, and the Tower Master clearly realized that this immense energy was coming from their own power source. The Tower Master erupted in fury, declaring that someone had broken into his magical tower. At the explosion site, buildings began to collapse, and the destruction was widespread. Verdun emerged with difficulty from beneath the rubble, coughing in pain. Despite his injuries and clear weakness, Verdun gripped the magical staff tightly and looked at his hand. He noticed the staff had vanished and his power had shattered, but he realized he was still alive, which meant his experiment had succeeded. Verdun, with a trembling voice, confirmed that his experiment had indeed succeeded. Suddenly he felt something strange and noticed a powerful energy rushing toward him. Magical circles rapidly approached him, indicating someone was launching an attack. The Tower Master himself appeared before him, furious and brimming with magical power. Verdun wondered if the Tower Master had sensed what had happened to his men. The Tower Master extended his hand and unleashed a devastating magical attack at Verdun. The magical attack caused a massive explosion that brought about widespread destruction. When the dust settled, the Tower Master looked at the scene in surprise. He discovered a magical teleportation circle and realized Verdun had used it to escape. The Tower Master's fury burned hotter than ever. He never expected anyone to dare tamper with his tower. He vowed that he would find the one responsible for this attack and kill them, no matter who they were, even if it was the Emperor himself or just a child. The Tower Master screamed in pure rage, promising vengeance, that he would find that person and kill them. The Tower Master let out a threatening scream into the air, vowing that the culprit would not escape punishment. Elsewhere, the atmosphere was calm and the sky clear, indicating a place entirely different. Verdun felt extremely drowsy and unable to move, wanting only to stay as he was. Suddenly, Verdun heard the sound of water flowing nearby. He quickly jumped up in alarm as the water rushed toward him. Verdun wondered in confusion where he was, realizing he was supposed to be on the run. When Verdun looked into the water, he was shocked to discover that his appearance had completely changed. He was puzzled, wondering why he had suddenly transformed like this. He noticed that his brown hair had turned a light gray, and his black eyes had become a clear blue. Verdun fearfully questioned whether he had become a completely different person, even though he believed the experiment had succeeded. He began recalling his memories, the success of his experiment, his defiance of the laws of the sky, and his swift escape from the Tower Master using the teleportation circle. Verdun reassured himself that he had used magic to flee from the Tower Master and had ended up in this strange place. He looked around and realized he had arrived somewhere he had never seen before. Verdun noticed that the trees here were unlike any in the magical tower region of Bohemien, which meant he had transported himself very far away. He smiled with joy upon realizing he had successfully teleported almost halfway across the continent. Verdun felt immense happiness and screamed in freedom, knowing he had escaped the tower using the pre-prepared magic circle. He sarcastically wondered what the Tower Master was feeling now and assured himself that the Master would be furious, especially since he wouldn't be able to identify him due to the destruction caused. Verdun realized that destroying the tower wouldn't be enough to end his master's influence, because the Master was known as the one capable of anything. But he decided it was enough for now, affirming that he would use this time to grow stronger while the tower was being rebuilt, for the sake of his revenge. Verdun resolved to destroy everything the Tower Master had built, to immortalize his name as a true mage, and fulfill his vengeance. He confirmed to himself that this was his only goal, revenge and proving himself as a mage. With a confident smile, Verdun realized he would be saying goodbye to the magic tower for a long time. In a nearby forest, a goblin creature was chopping wood with an axe. Verdun used the spell Wind Cutter to quickly strike the goblin. The goblin fell to the ground after being hit by Verdun's spell. Verdun felt that using magic didn't feel much different than before. He wondered again if his only issue was his appearance, and noticed that his current appearance hadn't changed his magical ability. He came to understand the difficulty of his current situation. The presence of goblins meant he was very far from the nearest village. Verdun noticed wheel tracks on the road and began to wonder what had happened here. He saw a box that had been left on the road and assumed its owners had abandoned it in a hurry. Verdun used the spell Mana Detection to try and locate the box's owner. He followed the trail of mana from the box, heading toward the source of a loud noise coming from a distance. A man appeared, driving a carriage at high speed while shouting at his horses to run faster. The man was extremely angry and frustrated with his situation, wondering fearfully how things had ended up like this for him. He recalled that while passing through the forest, he had come across the remains of a group of bandits who were supposedly wiped out recently. The man tried to negotiate with the bandits, claiming he had connections with Baron Baith. But it didn't work. All his mercenaries fled in fear of death. The real problem began when, suddenly, a terrifying orc with a strange smile appeared in front of him. The man felt a sense of relief when the orc began attacking the bandits instead of him, allowing him to escape. Still, he remained anxious that the orc might be chasing him. So he drove the carriage even faster. He began shouting at the horses to go faster, terrified of being followed. Suddenly, the carriage overturned due to excessive speed, and the man was thrown violently to the ground. He winced in pain, holding his back after falling from the carriage. As he tried to stand up, he suddenly sensed something strange around him. When he looked around in concern, he saw numerous goblins and orcs surrounding him. The man realized in despair that he was about to die because of the approaching monsters. The creatures charged toward him at great speed to attack. The man thought in sheer fear that everything was over now. But suddenly high earthen walls rose around the man, shielding him from the monsters. Verdun appeared, standing atop the wall, admitting that he forgot to leave an opening for air. The monsters turned toward Verdun angrily, preparing to attack. Verdun decided to face the monsters and clean up the area before the man suffocated inside. He prepared himself for his first real battle since his transformation, aside from his earlier fight with the goblin. The largest orc charged toward Verdun, letting out a terrifying roar. Verdun began the confrontation with excitement, considering this a perfect opportunity to test his new abilities. Flames spread through the trees due to the magic Verdun unleashed. Verdun cast the spell Multiple Fire Arrows to strike the surrounding monsters. The monsters screamed in pain and burned under the fiery assault. One of the large beasts charged at Verdun in a fit of rage. Verdun stood confidently on a high hill, ready to face the furious creature. He launched a dual attack, using the spells Multiple Fire Arrows and Strong Wind simultaneously. Verdun declared the use of the dual casting technique to boost the power of his attack. He unleashed a powerful fire-based strike called Blazing Flame Arrow, which hit the monsters hard. The attack caused a massive explosion that wiped out most of the monsters in the area. The monsters screamed in agony, scattered across the ground after the devastating assault. Verdun was astonished by his newfound strength, remembering how in the past he couldn't even defeat a single goblin. He looked around and realized there were no monsters left. Suddenly he remembered the man he had trapped inside the earthen wall and rushed to save him from suffocation. Out of nowhere, a remaining monster approached Verdun from behind, trying to attack him. Verdun noticed the danger just in time. He was shocked to see that one of the monsters was still alive and attempting to strike him. After the battle ended, a carriage moved quietly away from the scene. Inside it was a man named Mr. Conrad, who was extremely happy and thanked Verdun from the bottom of his heart, saying he would never forget this day. Mr. Conrad continued expressing his deep gratitude to Verdun, saying he wouldn't have survived without his help. Verdun told Mr. Conrad to focus on the road so the carriage wouldn't flip over again. Mr. Conrad kept chattering, asking if Verdun had been hurt, but Verdun felt the man talk non-stop. Verdun recalled the danger he faced during the battle, admitting to himself that the situation had truly been dangerous. He remembered again how surprised he was that a monster had survived the powerful attack he had launched. At the moment the creature attacked, Verdun quickly used the spell Wind Cutter to finish it off. After the threat was gone, Verdun relaxed with a smile and told himself there was nothing to worry about. Verdun asked Mr. Conrad if bandit attacks were common in this area, and Mr. Conrad replied that this was the first time such a thing had happened. He explained that the forest lies within Baron Witt's lands, and that he had been on good terms with the Baron since childhood. They had exchanged many letters, and the Baron had previously assured him the area was safe after the bandits were eliminated. Verdun sat inside the carriage, thinking to himself that he had hired cheap mercenaries, the kind he usually avoided, because of what had happened during his journey. He remembered that his magical teleportation had succeeded, even though he initially thought it had failed, and he realized that he needed to hide his identity and stay out of Bohemian Tower's sight for a while. Mr. Conrad asked Verdun if he could hear him, and Verdun realized he hadn't told him his name yet. Verdun decided to tell him his name was Verdun for now. But inwardly, he resolved to only use the name Verdun again once he was strong enough to face the Tower Master, and instead told the man his name was Asher. The carriage finally arrived at the gates of Baron Witt's castle. Baron Witt welcomed his friend Conrad, commenting that he looked in worse shape than the last time they met. Conrad laughed sheepishly, saying he had lost weight from running away from an orc. Baron Witt expressed concern that Conrad might be injured, but they reassured him he was fine, and that no fault lay with him. The Baron learned that Asher was the young mage who had saved Conrad and decided to host him in his castle as thanks. Baron Witt instructed his attendants to invite Asher into the castle. Asher thanked Baron Witt for providing clothes, food, and a place to rest. Baron Witt welcomed Asher to his estate with a warm smile. He introduced himself as Witt Henlord, the ruler of this barony. They sat down to eat, and Baron Witt asked Asher what he thought of the food. Asher assured him it was very delicious. The Baron told him he had prepared a reward of 1,000,000 gold coins for saving his friend Conrad. Baron Witt then offered Asher a new mission, promising generous compensation if he accepted it. Asher thought to himself that this was a good opportunity to earn money and improve his combat magic skills, so he asked for more details. The Baron began to explain that an incident occurred a few days ago in the southern forest, where hanging corpses were found, villagers from a nearby village that had been completely destroyed. Baron Witt said he wanted the issue resolved before the departure of an important figure known as the Absolute. Asher felt this could be considered repayment for the hospitality he had received. Asher discussed the possibility that a mage might be among the bandits and asked the Baron when the mission would begin. The Baron smiled confidently as he responded to Asher's question. He told him the mission would begin in 4 days, and after 4 days a knight named Enoch, the leader of the mission, introduced himself to Asher and explained that he served under Baron Witt. Asher was introduced to the other team members, including a young man named Barak, who greeted him enthusiastically. Asher introduced himself to the team, saying he was pleased to meet them. Asher thought to himself in surprise about the situation. He hadn't expected that helping someone would lead to a dangerous mission involving bandits. Asher asked Captain Enoch if the people gathered here were all part of the team, and Enoch replied that they were a group of adventurers drawn by rumors of strange orc sightings. Enoch spoke about the large reward, saying that it was what had drawn even gold-ranked adventurers to join the mission. Verdun observed the adventurers, noting to himself that gold-class adventurers could rival regular knights in combat strength due to their use of internal energy and enhanced weapons. The mission team advanced cautiously into the forest, including 3 knights, but Verdun's presence was essential in case there was a mage among the bandits. Commander Enoch confirmed to Verdun, now known as Asher, that if there was a mage among the bandits, they would rely on him to confront them. Enoch explained to Asher that if the mage continued launching long-range attacks, even the knights would struggle to advance. He added that he hoped there wasn't a mage among them, to which Verdun calmly smiled and said that would be unfortunate. The team suddenly stopped when Asher detected a magic circle up ahead. Asher stepped forward and used the Dispel spell to eliminate the magic in the circle. A massive magic circle became clearly visible in the air after the previous illusionary one was dispelled. Everyone was shocked by the appearance of such a large magical formation within the region. Asher explained that the first circle was an illusion, and this new one was a type of alarm. He asked everyone to step back while he completed the dispelling process. Asher completed the spell with force and successfully dispelled the circle entirely. The adventurers and knights expressed amazement at Asher's strength, wondering how he could destroy a magic circle so easily. Enoch felt that Asher had to be at least a second-tier mage. Verdun began thinking to himself about what it meant to be an adventurer, someone who roams the continent, taking on requests to defeat monsters or explore the unknown. Adventurers were respected despite constantly facing death, as fame and fortune followed those with the necessary skills. But when an adventurer grew too powerful and lost their honor, turning against humanity, they became nothing more than a dangerous bandit. Some of the bandits were grumbling about their poor situation and running out of food, feeling increasingly frustrated. One of them shouted angrily at his men to find food immediately. The night team approached the bandits cautiously, and one of them asked Enoch what to do. Enoch suggested attacking right away since the bandits were unaware of their presence. But Asher asked Enoch to wait a little longer, pointing out they hadn't yet assessed the strength of the mage with the bandits, and there was a chance he could be stronger than Asher himself. Enoch remained uneasy, worried that if the bandits left their location, they would lose their chance to capture them. Asher pointed out that there was only one viable option at this point. The bandit leader spoke with his men, expressing frustration over the loss of their comrades and the lack of a clear plan. He voiced his despair about losing so many men, and recalled how he had gone from adventurer to bandit in pursuit of money. The leader proposed attacking another village, but one of his men warned him that the Baron had previously been angered by the hanging corpses. One of the leader's men confirmed they were currently hiding under magical concealment and suggested moving soon toward a city called Martis. The leader finally decided to begin attacking the nearby villages. But the attack began suddenly, with fire spreading around the bandits, causing shock and confusion among them. A massive, unexpected explosion filled the area with flames and smoke. The bandits were stunned to realize the explosion wasn't natural, it was magic. They screamed in terror when they discovered they had walked into an ambush set by the knights, led by Enoch. The bandits tried to defend themselves quickly, but were hit with strong, direct strikes. The mage Belson was severely injured in the surprise attack and collapsed to the ground, bleeding heavily. The bandit leader ran toward Belson, trying to help him while shouting his name. He quickly realized that the defensive mana barrier Belson had used had been shattered, which caused the severe injury. After evaluating the enemy's strength, Enoch declared that the situation was now completely under Asher's control and left the rest of the mission to him. The bandit leader shouted angrily that the Baron clearly intended to kill them, especially after hiring a mage. The leader fiercely challenged Enoch and charged at him with his sword. Enoch and the bandit leader exchanged blows, and the bandit swore he would send Enoch's head to the Baron as a message. Enoch responded coldly, daring him to try if he could. Belson attempted to flee the battle quickly, but struggled due to his severe wounds. He realized his pursuers had no ability to fly, which gave him a moment of relief. But Asher challenged him with a swift attack using the spell Multiple Ice Arrows. Belson wondered if Asher was only trying to slow him down, and decided to strike back with full force. Verdun responded powerfully with the spell Multiple Fire Arrows to counter the ice attack. The fire and ice spells collided with massive force, triggering a huge explosion in the area. As the smoke and dust cleared, the ground was revealed. scorched and damaged from the intensity of the clash. Belson stood with difficulty, fatigued, but told Asher that he had chosen the wrong opponent. He explained that even though he was injured, he could still deal with Asher and escape, especially since the knight Enoch wasn't with him. Asher responded calmly and confidently, affirming that he had no intention of letting him escape. Belson smirked mockingly, admitting that Asher had great confidence and rare skill, but insisted he wouldn't survive. He revealed his true face and, with a sinister smile, vowed that Asher would die here today. Belson cast a powerful third-tier spell called Falling Ice, attempting to kill Asher. He shouted with all his might, "Die!" while Asher calmly prepared to counter the attack. A massive ice barrier formed around Verdun, attempting to trap him. Belson stopped and smiled confidently, believing he had secured victory. But suddenly the ice began to crack, stunning and shocking Belson with the unexpected result. The ice surrounding Asher began to crack rapidly. Belson was deeply shocked to see that Verdun had managed to block his falling ice spell without injury. Asher stood confidently, declaring that he had used a third-tier spell called Earth Sphere. Asher shattered the ice completely, its shards scattered all around him. Belson asked in terror how a second-tier mage could use third-tier magic. Asher calmly responded with mockery, asking Belson what exactly he thought of him. Belson began to suspect that Verdun wasn't just casting third-tier magic, but also using multiple elemental types. Belson tried to launch another attack, but Asher was faster and struck him with a decisive blow. Belson collapsed to the ground, completely defeated, while Asher stood beside him in victory. Asher quietly said to himself that it was a good thing he joined this mission. He sarcastically thanked Belson, saying that thanks to him, he had learned the proper way a mage should fight. Elsewhere, the orc, wearing a distinctive pendant, stood in a state of intense rage. Asher recalled 2 days before the mission that he had created a special potion using materials taken from the magic tower. The potion was called Mana Circle Expander, and Asher confirmed that, although it was effective, he never wanted to conduct human experiments again. Asher remembered the pain and suffering he had endured during previous experiments at the magic tower. He clearly recalled those days of hardship and how much stronger he had become since then. Asher looked at Belson's body and confirmed to himself that he was completely dead. He decided he needed proof of his success for the Baron and began thinking of a way to provide it. He noticed Belson's magical staff and decided to use it as evidence of victory. Asher examined the staff using the appraisal spell and discovered that it contained a magic stone that enhanced spellcasting speed and the power of ice magic. Barak came running toward Verdun, happy to see he was safe. Asher apologized for the delay, saying the bandits were stronger than he had expected. Asher asked Barak if the other bandits had been defeated, and Barak replied that Commander Enoch was handling it and would finish soon. Before returning, Asher asked Barak for permission to ask a question. He wondered what happened to the possessions the bandits left behind. Barak enthusiastically answered that the Baron had said Asher could take whatever loot he wanted unless there was a serious objection. Asher remembered Baron Witt's smile and gratefully decided to keep Belson's staff. The team returned afterward, and everyone thanked Verdun, saying that without him the losses would have been severe. The bandits were stunned when they learned their mage Belson had died, and they were thrown into a state of fear. The bandit leader realized the situation had become extremely dire. He feared being dragged to the Baron to be executed. In anger and despair, the bandit leader decided he had nothing left to lose and launched a ferocious attack. His desperate charge began with strength, trying to break through the knights' formation. He screamed at the knights to get out of his way, consumed by rage. Realizing that without the mage Belson he couldn't break the encirclement easily, he decided to resort to a final plan. His idea was to kill one of the knights and escape on horseback. The leader clashed with Knight Enoch in a direct and intense duel. But suddenly, during the fight, the leader felt something strange. His weapon unexpectedly fell from his hand. He was shocked that his sword had fallen without him realizing what had happened, and he began to collapse to the ground. The leader fell, completely defeated, to everyone's surprise. The knights quickly moved in, restraining him as he struggled in vain. Enoch approached calmly, mocking the leader, saying that honor wasn't needed in a situation like this. Enoch stated that honor ends at the moment of death, and then coldly killed the bandit leader. Enoch showed a brief moment of regret for what he had done, admitting it was an unbecoming act. He expressed his regret to Asher, saying that if he'd had more time, he would have preferred to face the leader properly. But Asher assured him his performance had been impressive. Asher asked Enoch why some bandits had been kept alive, and Enoch replied that some soldiers recognized their faces. He added that they might be survivors from the attacked village and would be investigated at the castle. One of the knights was ordered to return to the area with the prisoners. The knights treated the restrained bandits harshly, ordering them to stand up straight. One of the bandits tried to escape, screaming that he didn't want to be dragged off and killed like this. A knight stepped forward to pursue the fleeing bandit, saying he would handle it and return quickly. But Asher felt something unnatural and asked the knight to wait a moment. The knight, just about to give chase, suddenly sensed something strange and dangerous surrounding him. He began to smell blood in the area, which caused him great concern about the source of the scent. Suddenly something bizarre happened. Everyone began to feel dizzy and disoriented. The knight was struck by a sudden, powerful blow that sent him crashing to the ground instantly. The head of the escaping bandit suddenly fell before the knight, motionless, shocking everyone present. Everyone looked up in astonishment, wondering if what they saw was an orc or something even more dangerous. Asher began to observe the situation and said that it looked like the adventurers hadn't managed to eliminate that creature. A massive orc appeared, wielding an axe, causing everyone to question whether this was truly a normal orc. Asher felt that it wasn't just about this orc. There were dozens of demi-humans nearby. Everyone realized with fear that this giant orc was the leader of a group of demi-humans. The orc was enormous, with a terrifying face and a clown-like smile, far larger than any regular orc. The massive orc moved toward them, and it was clear that it had evolved to a much stronger level. The orc began issuing attack orders, charging forward with a group of goblins and other orcs. Commander Enoch shouted for everyone to take defensive positions and to focus on eliminating the goblins first. The giant orc attacked with full force, landing a heavy blow on Knight Enoch. Enoch fell to the ground from the sheer impact of the strike he received. The orc attempted to deliver a killing blow to the fallen Enoch. Barak and another knight quickly intervened, barely managing to block the orc's attack. A fierce battle broke out between the knights and the giant orc, with the force of the strikes visibly scarring the area. Enoch managed to regain his balance and counterattacked the massive orc with strength. He delivered a powerful strike to the orc, landing a direct hit. The orc staggered back slightly from the strength of Enoch's blow, but then the orc began to smile menacingly, as if it wasn't seriously affected by the wound. Suddenly, the orc grabbed a nearby goblin and began devouring it savagely. Everyone stood frozen in shock and horror, watching the orc eat the goblin. The orc pulled out a bone from its mouth and tossed it aside after finishing its meal. It stood again, seemingly recovering its strength in a strange way after devouring the goblin. Enoch commented bitterly with sarcasm, saying that the orc had healed itself by eating one of its own kind, and affirmed that returning safely was no longer an option. Commander Enoch began shouting at everyone to prepare for serious combat, while the massive orc raised his axe with a terrifying grin, ready to strike. The orc charged with incredible speed and overwhelming strength, hurling his massive axe with tremendous force. One of the knights was struck with fear and shock as he saw the axe flying toward him at great speed. Everyone was stunned when the orc's axe clashed violently with the knight's sword, knocking him backward and causing the weapon to crack. The sword began to break under the immense pressure, leaving the knight in shock and disbelief. The blade shattered completely, shards flying into the air right in front of the stunned knight's face. The flying shards pierced the knight's body, causing severe injuries. The knight screamed in pain from the wounds before collapsing to the ground, seriously hurt. Barak screamed in panic, calling out his comrade's name, Harris, after witnessing what happened to him. Meanwhile, the giant orc tried to ambush Barak from behind at high speed, but Enoch quickly warned him. Barak turned swiftly and countered the orc's attack confidently, declaring he would cut him down with his sword. But Barak was completely shocked to find his sword stuck in the orc's muscles, unable to cut him effectively. He asked in disbelief how his sword could be lodged in the orc's body without inflicting any visible damage. Barak struggled to pull his sword out of the orc's muscles, but failed and began to panic in the dangerous situation. Suddenly, Asher intervened by casting the spell Earth Shatter to knock the orc back and away from Barak. Asher told Barak to retreat quickly and take cover behind him, which Barak promptly did. Barak successfully pulled back from the orc and ran toward Asher, shouting that he was safe but had lost his weapon. He began shouting, asking how he was supposed to fight now without his sword, while Asher explained that the orc's physical strength had greatly increased after devouring the goblin earlier. Barak said in frustration that he had used all his strength attacking the orc to no avail, and wondered if this creature was legendary due to its bizarre power. But Asher calmly denied that, pointing out that while the orc was powerful, it wasn't a legendary creature, and began explaining the nature of its strength in detail. Asher explained that the orc had regenerative abilities and enhanced strength from consuming others, and it could control weaker beings and drive them mad. Its physical power even surpassed knights. Verdun continued, noting that this orc was certainly different from normal orcs. But still, Asher didn't consider its strength enough to be truly exceptional. Asher began explaining that ordinary magic has certain limits. No matter how much mana is used, its power remains capped. But there was one spell that could surpass the limits of normal power: the geographical manipulation spell. He began preparing to cast this powerful spell, moving his hands through the air as a massive magic circle formed in front of him. The ground shook violently and began to crack as Asher activated the spell, causing widespread panic. Some of the warriors were terrified by the quake caused by Asher's spell, thinking the situation was getting worse. One of the warriors screamed in fear, convinced the end was near and that they would all die here. But Enoch quickly stepped in and reassured everyone loudly, confirming that this earthquake was Verdan's magic, not another threat, and told them all to stay calm. Knight Enoch began reassuring everyone, saying that what was happening was just Asher's magic, but it was clear from his expression, and those of the others, that they couldn't truly stay calm in the face of such a terrifying scene. The ground in front of them had turned into something resembling a disaster, and many of the monsters were falling and screaming in terror as the earth cracked beneath their feet. The creatures were being tossed about and falling into the earth's pits, screaming in fear and pain. The tremors caused chaos among the monsters, who could do nothing but fall and cry out. The massive orc appeared in the center of a large crater, filled with rage and letting out a terrifying roar. At that moment, Asher cast another powerful third-tier spell, Fireball, which ignited the area with tremendous force. The flames spread rapidly, consuming everything in the vicinity, turning the battlefield into a scene from hell. Barak was extremely excited by the fire, and happily said that seeing the monsters burn was deeply satisfying, to which one of the knights told him to maintain his dignity. Asher began explaining to himself that the third-tier spell, Geographical Manipulation, could expand without limit, but it consumed such a massive amount of mana that it made the spell impractical to use regularly, which is why most mages didn't rely on it as a primary spell. Asher felt a bit frustrated that he didn't have enough mana to produce power beyond third-tier spells, making the results less than he had hoped for. Suddenly everyone heard a terrifying sound coming from the center of the fire, which made them extremely tense. The massive orc reappeared among the flames, still alive despite all the wounds and burns he had sustained. Barak, now fearful and discouraged, asked what they were supposed to do now. Asher calmly responded that if the orc refused to die by fire, then he would use another solution. He began casting a powerful ice spell that covered the orc's body completely. Barak shouted Asher's name in excitement as he witnessed his immense magical power. Asher used two spells simultaneously, Multiple Ice Arrows and Winter Storm, to freeze the orc completely. He confidently declared that he would freeze the orc to death and launched the ice spell with overwhelming force. Asher activated the dual-cast Piercing Frost Arrows technique, which rapidly froze the orc's body along with other surrounding monsters. But the giant orc didn't give up easily and began moving again, even though his body was almost completely frozen. The orc charged toward Verdan in rage despite his condition, clearly determined to attack. Asher thought calmly that even if this orc could regenerate endlessly and feel no pain, he would stop his movement entirely. He began casting another powerful spell, taking a serious and focused battle stance. He cast the spell Glacial Orb, which struck the orc directly and began freezing him completely. The power of the ice spell penetrated the orc's body and froze him in place, stopping him entirely from moving. Asher stood victorious, calmly announcing the end of the battle and the successful completion of his mission. Elsewhere, the famous magic city of Verenti appeared, shining in its enchanting beauty. Two men were sitting and talking in the city. One asked the other if he had heard the latest news. The other confirmed that he had, that the magic tower had been completely shut down for the first time, and that an explosion had occurred at its power source, and he wondered whether these reports were true. A group of mages were speaking among themselves about the state of the Bohemian Magic Tower, explaining that most of the remaining mages had disappeared, leading to a complete shutdown of the tower's operations. It was clear from their conversation that being sent on that field mission had been extremely burdensome for them. One of them remarked that he hadn't felt any sense of civilization in a very long time, while another commented on the scale of the damage to the tower, stating that it was far too great for a simple energy core explosion to be the only cause. At the same time, in a nearby location, two other men were having a conversation about the events. One of them noted that the public believed what happened was divine punishment, while others thought it was a man-made disaster. The speaker expressed joy that they had managed to prove their research theory. He then wondered aloud whether any messages had been received from the magic tower while they were busy with their fieldwork. Suddenly, one of the mages, wearing a long cloak, stopped walking when the man said someone might have deliberately planned the shutdown of the Bohemian Magic Tower. A man with white hair then stepped in, speaking in a low and confident voice, explaining that the Bohemian Tower couldn't have shut itself down on its own. He added that, from what he'd heard, the tower had been conducting secret experiments, and that might have been the reason it was attacked. But before the man could finish his explanation, one of the mages interrupted him harshly, grabbing him forcefully and throwing away the cup he had been holding, causing him to cry out in pain. The mage held the man tightly and demanded that he repeat what he had just said. This stunned and frightened the white-haired man, who asked in terror why the mage was suddenly behaving so aggressively and strangely toward him. At that moment, another person with red hair appeared, standing a little farther away and asking in a quiet voice what had happened to the Bohemian Magic Tower. His face showed shock and confusion, and he repeated his question louder and more sharply, demanding to know exactly what had happened to the Bohemian Magic Tower.